Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. In this podcast, we dive into compassionate leadership in today's fast-paced business environment. With our experience and insights, we'll help you lead with heart while securing your career. Join us for engaging conversations and practical advice to elevate your leadership skills and make a real difference. I'm your host, Chris Hollerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, alongside Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader. Today, we will discuss what skills you need to be a humane leader and how to climb the management ladder and speak publicly. Hey, Roberto, how you doing?
I'm great, Chris. How about you?
I'm doing good, very good. Hopefully, my tongue will work better for the rest of the podcast.
Don't worry, it's okay.
So climbing the ladder, the management ladder, and still being a humane leader can be quite the challenge, because in some cultures, the leaders are not necessarily very humane. But we'll try and attack this so that we can help people become leaders and still become, humane leaders. I think some of the skills we've touched on in other podcasts, one of the ones I'd like to start with is really your presence. And that can be your presence on camera for, when you're having Skype meetings, but also when you're doing public speaking. It's very important that you present yourself like a leader to get promoted, don't you think?
Among the many factors to become a leader, yes, I do. It's like to have this motivation from your leader, I think it is related to the public speaking. So yes, I think it is.
Yeah, one of the best classes I had in college that helped me in my career was actually speech class. I was dreading it. I was not a good student in that area. And I'll tell you what, after going through that, it was a one semester class. So in my school, that was 16 weeks. So you did 16 speeches.
Well,
and they recorded them. And it was the first time I'd really ever, well, I had to give public speaking in high school and stuff, but in college, I had never, hadn't been recorded until then. Wow, what a difference it makes when you get to hear yourself. And even on these podcasts, I make a very conscious decision to try and not say that kind of pausing stuff. Boy, I was a disaster as a public speaker. My first speech was cringe. I just listening to it, I was ahs and ums and looking away, and it was pretty bad. But as a humane leader, you begin to realize that leadership presence, you can learn those skills. It takes practice. And for speech class, you had to record yourself and practice. And it makes a big difference. I think you develop your presence, and then people recognize that you're a good speaker, then you get more speaking opportunities, which leads to more possible promotions and leadership opportunities. So I think perhaps the very first stepping stone to becoming a leader is public speaking.
Okay, well, let me tell you that in this podcast, the ums and ahs is something that I do often here. I think that one of the things is in this podcast, we don't have a script. I don't read it, you don't read it. We talk as the ideas flow into our brain, and we talk about it. But I think the ums and ahs are part of something that you haven't structured before. Let's say that you speak about a topic. If you got into the meeting or you begin talking to a number of people and you haven't read about that topic or prepare about it, you're going to create the phrases, the words, and it's going to be, I think, it's going to be not related. It's not going to be a flow. So I think that's one of the things. But one thing that I should add, it is, in order for you, besides public speaking, that I think it is important, because I didn't have the classes that you had, and I was thrown into the lion cage and talk when I was an IC, not a manager, and I had really bad problems. But one thing that I had to add for anyone who wants to become a manager or a director is to do an introspection of yourself and to see what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses that you have, but not related to what you see in yourself, but what are required for a manager to know or a director to know. So with that in mind, I could tell you this, an MBA is something that really helps. And I have an MBA, and I remember well when I was studying at college that I saw statistics, for instance. And I said, okay, what is going to help me when I'm going to work? When I took the same class at the MBA, it totally makes sense because it was something related to business. At that case, when I was at college, all that data, all those numbers, crunching. But when I was at the MBA, it totally makes sense because I say, oh, yes, I understand. If I'm running a company or I'm the manager or director of a company and I want to know why our customers behave like that, well, with statistics, I could have those answers. So I think that an MBA will help, but before I continue, and I want to hear about you, and I will ask the question so later on, it is when to study the MBA. But what do you think about this?
Definitely on the when is important. I do think you need some work experience to see what you're going to be exposed to, what your interests are, because there's many different flavors of the MBA with different aspects you can focus on. So, I don't think personally, I would not recommend getting an MBA directly right after your first, 4-year degree. I would get some work experience so that you then have a better idea. Is it the financial management side? Is it the accounting side? Is it marketing? Is it some of the statistical analysis of sales? What interests you the most? Because if you're passionate about it, you have a better chance of being successful at it, in my opinion. If you hate it, man, I hate accounting, but I'm going to get my MBA and go in and try and be an accounting manager. You can possibly be successful at that, but it's less likely. Versus if you're really into the investing side and financial management, the finance aspects of it, hey, well then maybe get your MBA slightly tilted that way with some more financial learning, and you're likely going to be more successful. But I want to hit a key thing you mentioned, which was be introspective. So just like with speech class, where you record yourself and grade yourself. How many times did I say ah? How many times did I say critique yourself. Same thing with doing the MBA and thinking about your skill set. You need to really be introspective and critique yourself and say, what am I good at? Really good at. Be hard on yourself like a vice president would be on you, evaluating you for that next job. Is it, hey, when I do my own home budget for my life, I overspend and I didn't have enough money in my checking account to pay the grocery bill. Hey, you know what? Accounting's probably not going to be your strong suit. That doesn't mean you can't be great in marketing or sales or some other aspect. But if if you really assess yourself strongly and you realize I'm not even good at keeping my checkbook balanced, my bank account balanced, accounting isn't maybe the strong area you'd be in. So be willing to be tough on yourself evaluating, because a humane leader, as humane as I want to be with you, Roberto, I'm gonna notice which things you're good at and which things you're not. And the humane leader is not going to promote you into something that you're clearly not good at, where there's examples of you not being as good at accounting as you were at marketing ideas. So I'm not going to promote you to be the accounting director. I might promote you to be the marketing manager first because I saw that you did really well with marketing ideas. A humane
Yeah,
leader doesn't just let you get to do what you want, humane employee, right? They try and guide you to things that you can be successful at. And if you can critique yourself, honestly critique yourself, that process with your leadership to move your career upwards will go much smoother if you're truly, honestly critiquing yourself in those skills.
yeah, indeed, and I totally agree with you. Regarding the MBA, you have to take the MBA when you have been going for a number of years as an IC. I have a lot of friends who were ICs and suddenly went to Kellogg, to Wharton, to Brown, when they knew that they had the knowledge, not the knowledge to become a manager, the knowledge of an IC, but they require this knowledge to become a manager or director in that company's on in other ones. So that's the first one. The second one, I have done an introspection of myself, and what I mean is usually when I produce this podcast and upload it, I have heard from me a number of ums and ahs. And I thought, what can I do to overcome this? And I have noticed that when I read something and I listen to English before this podcast, my 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 involvement in this podcast is more flow because I'm usually thinking in Spanish, or in English, but it's something like that, and it happens the same to you. So you want to become a manager or a director, either one well-known established company or in a startup. Okay, what are your weaknesses? What are you lacking of? Are you lacking of maybe communicating with another peers? What are you going to do about it? This is not taking a pill, and saying, "Oh, I have an awesome communication skills." No, you have to train about it. So either you communicate with other people, you write down something. This is like I remember well when I was studying high school in the States. Um, it was the era where Ronald Reagan was the president. And I remember that he told twice, well, in two different times, some phrases. The first one was to trust but verify. So in this case with the communication, you have to trust that you're communicating effectively with another person, but you have to validate, you have to verify that is taking the proper message to the receiver and that the receiver is managed it correctly. That's the first one. And the second one is when writing something, it is sweats the one who reads or the one who writes. Because when we type something through email, we think about everything that we have in the mind, but that doesn't mean that in the email is going to be correctly read or understood. So when you type, you finish, excuse me, writing it, you have to verify it again by reading it, adding something, deleting something, and you can, when it makes sense to the people who's going to receive it, then you can send it. So an introspective exercise is something that you must do often, not once, often, to become, to know your weaknesses.
Yes, no, absolutely. And communicating, we've talked about in many podcasts where communicating and those communication skills are so critical. When I think about my own career and progressing, initially I got promoted due to pure technical skills. I didn't have many other managerial skills because I just was too young to have those experiences, right? But I was very good technically. And so developed skills and teaching others how to do technical things along the way, picking up financial skills, communication skills, and so on. So yes, I had things like, let's say, speech class in college prepared me somewhat, but doing a speech in front of your fellow students is a lot different than doing a speech in front of the IT town hall of, 100 people, 1,000 people, depending on the size of your company. So
Yes.
I think if you're introspective and you think about those things and work on those skills all the time, your leadership probabilities go up. You also need to be thinking about, is the right culture fit for your leadership level that you're at? Is the company the right place for you to progress? Depending on the company, you may love working at the company as an individual contributor, but as a manager or a director, you may find the culture is not a good fit for your style of how you want to be a manager. So these are some other things to consider. So after you've mastered, let's call them skills, financial skills, marketing skills, sales skills, accounting skills, you also have to kind of think about, well, is this the kind of company that I will excel at or have good opportunities to be a leader in? And I'll use an example. Let's suppose that it's a gigantic company, and whenever there's a financial downturn or you're not quite making numbers, you have to do layoffs. You just have to. You know that from working there. Every time you've heard the earnings call, it's a publicly traded stock company, you listen to the earnings call and you hear, well, our numbers quite aren't as strong, so we'll certainly be putting cost controls into play. Well, that's a code word. Cost controls, right, means lay people off. Well, as a leader, you've got to be ready to do that, and we'll do it humanely, right? As humane leaders, we will be very humane in doing layoffs, but you're going to have to do layoffs. And if that's something you're not comfortable with, either you learn to be comfortable with it, or maybe the company you're working at isn't the right place for you, and you work at a company that doesn't have that philosophy, and they manage around earnings different ways. Or maybe it's a smaller company that's not public, so it doesn't have the kind of quarterly demands on it that some large public companies have. So wanting to be a humane leader and wanting to be a leader, you develop skills, but you also have to think about where you want to be a humane leader. And make sure that you go someplace where your skills, your personality will fit well as a leader. You may fit perfectly as an individual contributor, but as a leader, that may not be the right fit for you. And so sometimes going to a different company gives you a better chance of being a better leader, because you've got certain skills, you've learned them, but this other company needs those skills more, and they want it to have someone in a leadership role to spread those skills around. So sometimes the best leadership opportunities for you to develop aren't in the company that you're in today.
Totally agree with you. And let me tell you, that happened to me. I used to work at a bank from when I was 23 years old to almost 28. And when I was 25, I began as a junior at the lowest engineer position I was there at 23. When I was 25, I was the youngest project leader in the whole group. It was bank, another 4 companies in the financial industry, and I was the youngest one at 25. I had 2 engineers and I was rising rapidly. But suddenly at 27, I said, okay, my next step is to become a manager. And I knew I had these skills, the hard skills, the soft skills. I required these ones. I knew that I had to, in this case, to take an MBA, which I took some years after that. And I approached my director and say, hey, I have done this, I have provided these results, these achievements, these accomplishments. What's next? And he told me plainly, I'm blunt. He told me, Roberto, I'm sorry, but I have to spend 5 more years at the bank to become a manager. And I said, why? I jumped from junior, mid, senior to project leader, and I have been project leader for the last 2 years. I want to become a manager. And he told me no. So what I did, and I understood that the bank wasn't the place where I was going to become a manager. So I began searching and I arrived to a startup company, the first one since 1998. And since then, I've been in startups. So I think to know your if your path in that company is going to end or has a more road to be in there, no?
Yeah. It's really looking at that company culture, like I was saying. That bank's culture was, look, we have a very rigid path to leadership. You got to follow the path. That doesn't exist in every company. There are plenty of companies that are going to be more objective about measuring your skills and trying to match you to roles. It's just truly assessing, is the company right for you? And that's hard. It's not always an easy decision to leave. You might be enjoying working at the bank, let's say, or whatever, and you have a lot of coworkers you enjoy working with, but you got to look at it over the long run of your career. You're probably going to work 35, 40, 45, some people 50 years. So if that's the case, you got to take the long-term view and say, you know what, maybe this company is good to start and get some basic skills, but for my next level role, it needs to be a different company. I found if you can have some peers, people that are going through similar things to you, maybe not at the same company, but what are their experiences? Share peer to peer. Right now, I think I could still give a good Roberto who's 25 or 28 years old. I think I could give him good advice, but I'm probably better at giving Roberto advice at 50 years old, just because it's closer to who I am as a peer. So if you can, seek out some peers that are in similar situations to you. Do you have any friends that have similar, career backgrounds? Are they in the same industry but different companies? And what are their thoughts on it? Because again, that humane leader who's going up management uses a lot of different sources for information to learn, not just podcasts, not just books, but real life peers, trusted peers. And I think that sometimes that can be a hard thing too, is to assess some of your friends and realize I like them as friends, but I may not like their career advice, or maybe their career advice is not as good. Or maybe they're such good friends, they're going to be brutally honest with you and say, Roberto, you're really great at doing X and Y, but I don't think you're really going to, be director material. But to get there, you need to develop your finance skills, because you're terrible with your money and you don't, do things well with managing your money. So if you really want to be a director, Roberto, you need to polish up those skills. So
Yeah.
sometimes that friend can give you advice you don't want to hear, that even the humane leader might be reluctant to tell you, Roberto, your finance skills are terrible, when that's probably what he really should tell you. But sometimes the friend will tell you instead.
Yes, those persons are mentors. You have to search for a mentor. But I would say that rather than having a mentor who will tell you what you want to hear, you have to find a mentor who will tell you what you don't want to hear, but you must listen. When it's going to hurt. Okay, dude, you want to become a director, but your communication skills are really bad. You're really lame. You have to work like that. And if you feel that, oh my God, this person is so rude, well, you're not taking away, excuse me, you're not taking closely that person knows better than you, has much better skills. And if you fix this, in this case, these communication skills, it will help you a lot to gain the success that you're looking for. And I think that is something key, because a mentor is like a therapist, like a psychologist, or a doctor in the same. The thing is, they're going to be not your friends. They are going to be the ones that are going to tell you the truth and what are you going to do about it. If you stay and you stick to the same path that you've been doing, you're going to end very soon. Instead of walking and walking and going, you have to think about that. And one thing that is something that I have to add is you have to be to use these soft skills. It is to be to use politics and diplomacy, because you could be the best guy or the best gal around, but if you don't use politics and diplomacy, you might not rise. I have known many people who doesn't know about IT, who doesn't know about engineering, but there are CIOs or CTOs of these startups and these big companies. Why? Because they knew how to use politics and diplomacy, which is, I think, a very important skills in this management ladder.
Oh, absolutely. And that's probably one of the hardest ones to learn, because in each company, the politics itself will be significantly different. So to be able to move into that company, get an understanding of how its unofficial paths, unofficial communications take place, those unofficial leaders who may not have the same title as you, but actually have more influence and have more control of what's going on than their title might reflect. That's hard to detect. I think, what I used to do when we would have large company meetings, bringing people from many different places together, was to get a sense of, well, who are the people gravitating to? So it's a coffee break, but hey, this guy's got 3 people talking to him, but this lady's got 9 people talking to him, but he's a vice president, she's a director, but more people want to hear what she's got to say. You might want to go hear what she's got to say and understand that, hey, you know what? She knows more about what's going on in that VP. She's the one who's really going to influence your career because she knows the things that really need to get done. So that politics can be difficult to learn, but I find it's an observational thing. If you really pay attention and observe, then you can get a better understanding of what the politics might be. And sometimes you're going to be successful at it. There were times I was successful at it. Towards the end of my career, I definitely did not read the tea leaves the way I should have. But that's the way it goes. As you're becoming a humane leader, you also need to realize you're not going to win all the time, but you got to get back up and try again. Each time is a setback, learn something from it, and try and learn again. And politics is a tough one. I don't know no good class to go to for figuring out office politics.
Indeed, because there is the hero that you must not listen to, but you have to emulate the things that the good things about politics. But the thing is, you must do an introspective exercise often to understand what's going on. Okay, so with this, I think we should do the wrap up. Do you agree?
Yep, absolutely. So thanks for joining us on another episode of How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We hope our insights help you become a smarter and more strategic leader. Apply today's lessons to see the positive impact on your team and your career. Catch all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. Join us again next week as we discuss something trendy in the leadership world. Until then, stay humane and stay successful. See you later, Roberto.
Bye, Chris.